to the message from Sunday. And when I say we, I mean myself, Alyssa Robinson, and our senior pastor, Reverend Daniel Humbert. So this Sunday, we were rounding out our worship series called A Path Worth Taking, where we are talking about living more generously. And it all was building up to praying and reflecting on what you could be committing and your estimate of giving for the year 2021. So for the past month, we have been talking about the importance of generosity, the importance of giving, why we give. And one of the things that has really struck me, not just this year, but year after year after year, I think Daniel might be the first pastor I've ever met who likes talking about giving and generosity and tithing. Most churches that I've been a part of, the pastor doesn't like talking about money. They don't like it makes them uncomfortable. They don't like asking people for donations. And so my first question of today is, why do you love talking about tithing and generosity?
Because I'm a freak, that's why.
That's the point I was getting at. So next question.
No, I I think for two reasons really. One is, I mean, they're both serious, but one is less serious. So one of my mentors in ministry early on, Charles Cook, he taught me that. Charles was a very unassuming guy. He was very down to earth and yet very structured. And he likewise was very intentional and actually enjoyed the what would be called the annual stewardship campaign. And so I just witnessed from him early on that, man, this was not something to be ashamed of or feel weird about or whatever. And so he set a good pace for me. And then secondly, and this is the much more important thing, is, man, I'm never going to be shy or ashamed or feel awkward about asking people to not only work on their spiritual journey, which again, I believe generosity is, but secondly, I'm never going to be embarrassed about asking people to contribute to God's ministry and to do God's work in the world. And that's what an annual generosity campaign is all about. It's about saying, hey, number one, do we want to grow our faith? And this is one way to do it, just like prayer and worship and scripture reading. And then number two, do we want to build God's kingdom? And golly, the answer to both of those is yes. I want to help you grow spiritually, and I want to help us together build God's kingdom. And that's what this is about. And so when I can genuinely believe that that's what we're doing, which I do, then man, I'm not going to be ashamed about that. I'm going to be excited about that and ready for that. And so that's why I'm the weird guy who likes to ask people to do that.
Well, and it sounds really simple, but like I said, a lot of pastors struggle with it. Why do you think that other pastors might struggle with asking their congregation to give?
Well, I can make two conjectures. One is they don't view it the way I view it. They tend to view it more like this is about funding the annual budget, and I'm embarrassed about having to fund the annual budget. Not that they're doing anything wrong or that they're doing anything appropriate. They're just, they feel like it's about funding a budget rather than building God's kingdom, and they feel awkward about that. And this is only conjecture because I have no clue, but I also believe a lot of pastors are not generous in their own right, and therefore they feel awkward about asking people for money when they themselves may not be being very generous themselves. And I certainly know that's true for some. It may not be true for others. And that was the lesson Charles taught me years ago that I really, really appreciated. It was very helpful to a young clergy to learn that lesson.
So like I mentioned, we have been asking people to fill out their estimate of giving. And some churches call it a pledge card, a commitment card, whatever it is, to say, okay, what are you committing to give for the following year? So my question is, why does this even matter? Why are we having to make a commitment to give? Why don't we just do it and give? Why are we year after year filling out these pledge cards or commitment cards?
Sure, that's a great question, and let me just say, you're not the first one to ever ask that question. I mean, that's an often asked question at any congregation I've been in, and there are kind of two reasons. One is, if it were as simple as your question suggests, that is to say, golly, why can't we just do this? We would, but we can't because not everybody considers it important. And so to talk about it first and then to ask people to sort of commit with some form of something, what we used to call in writing, now digitally confirmed, is really as straightforward as this. It's proven human behavior that anything I commit to, whether it's in writing or whether it's digitally or whether it's a formalized contract or whether it's even a wedding license, anything that I commit to, I'm much more likely to actually follow through on than if I just sort of mentally make a note or sort of conceptually commit. It's just proven human behavior. And so the reason we asked for the estimate of giving is not because it's a contract, because it's not. It literally says, and has for years now, that this can be changed at any time. And golly, if circumstances change, you are certainly welcome to change this. But it's simply a way on a tangible end to say, this is what we can count on. We can count on the fact that these folks have committed, and therefore we use that information on what I call the back end to kind of know what is a potential revenue stream for the actual ministry of the church for next year. Because if we didn't have some sense of that, even if it's not a commitment card, but for instance, people's regular history of giving who might not complete an estimate of giving, we at least have historical data. And so it's a twofold deal. One is sort of the human condition. I need something that kind of conditions me or suggests to me that, man, I'm in because I've filled something out or completed something. But then there's the tangible aspect of it on the back end that just helps guide us in terms of making plans for the future. But even on that tangible end, none of that's guaranteed, right? I mean, even that's not guaranteed. And we talk about that in our literal planning time is this is a tangible way to help us prepare a budget, but none of it's guaranteed. None of it's going to be there like money in the bank. It's a way to plan. So that's kind of.
And I'll say on a personal level, it forces me to think about my budget. And that's something that I figured out when I took the Dave Ramsey financial peace class a few years ago, is that when I'm just going month to month, well, the money that seems the easiest to be flexible on is the money that I was going to give to the church. But when I actually plan in advance and say, X amount of dollars every month is going to go out to the church on the first of every month, then I plan my budget around that. And I use the Dave Ramsey Every Dollar app to make sure that, because it gives suggestions on, how much of your income should be going to donations, how much should be going to living expensive, how much should be going to rent or mortgage. And so that's been really helpful for me. But part of that is at the end of each year, I stop and I look at my budget and I say, okay, what can I be giving in 2021? And I'll base my estimate of giving on that. And then I'll update my app so that I know what money is available after I tithe.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's been really helpful. Not to plug Dave Ramsey too much, but it's helped me out immensely. And I was recently able to buy a house because of all of the work I've been putting in for years using Dave Ramsey's finance plan. So if y'all are interested in jumping on board something like that, we've got free access to Ramsey Plus at tmumc.org/Ramsey. So
way to go. I was just going to put in the plug if you didn't, because it's free, brothers and sisters. And man, what an opportunity. And we're pleased to be able to offer that to the church members and their family members, because we believe in it, right? I mean, we believe that it's helpful. We believe that it can guide them. And in turn, and of course, this as a person who's done it, it helps people to become more generous on all levels, not just in the life of the church. And that's a really cool deal.
Yeah. And so it's really exciting because we talk often about the blessings that come out of giving, and they're not just financial blessings. But when I took control of my finances and of my budget, I'm at a point now that I'm giving more money to the church than I've ever given in my life, and I'm able to buy a home.
That's
So
right.
this is really exciting for me as a first-time homeowner, not to gush over it too much, but
It's a thing to celebrate. And I love that you share that because, man, who doesn't want, number one, to be generous? And number two, most people do want to be able to buy a house. And you're pointing out that, man, if I actually plan and save and work, I can do both of those things. I can both get a very valuable piece of property that means a lot to me and can help me grow in my own livelihood in terms of having a home, and I can be generous. How cool is that?
so my last question uh, is a weird question, I know, but is it ever enough? Can we ever have given enough? Or unless we're living like Jesus lived and literally give up everything we own, we're not doing enough.
Yeah. Well, the answer I want to share is going to sound weird on the front end, and I hope will sound better on the back end. But the short answer is no, we can never give enough. And I don't mean that in a fatalistic sense at all. But what I do mean is I think that God will always be able to outgive us, that God will always be more generous than us. And a part of our response to God is to basically keep growing in our generosity, keep growing in the way we give our lives away, the way we give love away, the way we give service away, the way we give money away. I think we could never outgive God, and therefore we could never give enough. But I don't mean that to say, man, pony up and make sure you're giving more, but rather recognize how good God really is and how much I actually owe God, but I'm not going to give out of obligation or guilt. I'm going to give and grow in my giving because I'm really grateful for all that God is doing. And so I don't think we can outgive God, and therefore we ought to just keep growing in our giving, I guess is the best way to say that.
Well, I want to thank all of y'all for tuning in to Go Beyond, but I also want to thank you for stepping on this journey with us on a path worth taking over the past month, and just remind you that you can fill out your estimate of giving at tmumc.org/path. If you're still praying about it and thinking about it, there are also additional resources on that page, like stories from congregants. There's daily devotionals. There's a prayer guide. There's charts to help you better understand, based on your income bracket, what could you be giving? Not necessarily at full tithe, but working towards that. So there's a lot of really helpful resources for you to start to dig into. How can I take that first step to generosity? So tmumc.org/path. I hope you'll